Firstly, I want to thank all of you who are here tonight, and I want to thank the Conrad Hilton Foundation, Steve Hilton, Judy Miller and their team, and the board of the Conrad Hilton Foundation, and of course the distinguished panel of judges, of jurors. I would also like to acknowledge my global board, represented here by Tilak and by Cindy, who, and by extension, our global network of very rooted affiliates working on our shared mission in 70 countries around the world. Today, of course, is a very exciting day for HelpAge International. In our 30-year history, this is one of our greatest achievements, so thank you. We're both honored and privileged to receive the Conrad Hilton 2012 Prize. But this award is not just about us. We accept it on behalf of the aging populations across the developing world who will benefit from this recognition. And the timing is spectacular. In April this year, the World Health Organization created a historic opportunity for us. They dedicated World Health Day 2012 to global aging populations. As Dr. Margaret Chan, the Director General of WHO, said last week in Geneva, when a 100-year-old man finishes a marathon, we must rethink the conventional definitions of what it means to be old. Past stereotypes developed in past centuries no longer hold during our era of longevity. HelpAge was privileged to be there as one of the invitees in Geneva. Also, Klaus Schwab was there from the World Economic Forum. He's 75, and he has no problem running the World Economic Forum. And he made a comment to say that this year, the World Economic Forum has a global risk register, and they've put the mismanagement of global aging in the global risk register of the World Economic Forum. Business understands, and I think the World Economic Forum understands, that aging really does need to be better handled in the future. I see, from our experience in HelpAge, huge policy and program gaps across the world, but in equal measure, there are solutions, and some nation states and civil society actors are making good progress. You know, one of the good things that happened on World Health Day is we had, I was saying to Eric last night, Eric Hilton, we had 20 million people tweeting on older people's health around the world. And that shows the power of social media, because probably there was only about 30 people in the room in Geneva with the UN, but 2 million people were engaging. It's great that Robert Zoellick has been here tonight as the keynote speaker. The World Bank has for many years supported old age income security and pensions, and they make a real difference for older people and their grandchildren. Girls in South Africa living with their grandmothers who have a citizen's pension are 3 centimeters taller as a result of the grandparents and how the grandparents use the pension. As Robert Zoellick said, many countries are growing old before they grow rich. Developing countries are aging around 4 times faster than we've aged in the United States or in the UK. It's a very, very dramatic story. So many developing countries have both the dual challenge and opportunity of youth bulges, but equally they have aging populations. And they're going to need great policy solutions to address those opportunities and challenges. We need to enable older adults to break out of the models of dependency and disability to one of economic development and social value creation. And this is both economically smart to do, and it's the right thing to do. From an ethical perspective, it is our duty. However, we mustn't flatter ourselves. This is a daunting challenge. Over 3/4 of those over 60 live in countries of extreme poverty with limited resources. Through our work with older people in the developing world, we hear one thing over and over again. They tell us that their greatest asset is their health and their physical strength. Unfortunately, as we know, health and strength are temporary, and as the health begins to fail, it becomes difficult for these older people to continue the physical labor through which they earn their income and their families' living. And it is these same older people who have no access to social security of any kind. Their vulnerability to poverty is extreme, and it's worsened by the crippling cost of medical care, assuming they can access any medical care at all. Older people, however, remain resilient even in pain. 35 million people around the world today have dementia. Every 4 seconds, a new person in the world gets dementia. There will be 70 million people with dementia by 2020. Peter Peel was speaking at a conference on Alzheimer's and dementia about 3 weeks ago in the UK. And he's likened dementia to where we were with HIV/AIDS 20 years ago. Stigma, a lack of diagnosis, a lack of research, a huge complex care challenge, and a huge global challenge, economic challenge. 1% of GDP has been lost from dementia in its current form last year. And if we make that personal, 1 in 3 of us, assuming most of us in this room are going to we're going to live to at least 85. When we're 85, 1 in 3 of us are going to have dementia. Something needs to be done. Investment needs to be made to take on that challenge and find solutions. On a more practical level, one of the challenges we face is, many children are migrating to urban areas and traditional forms of family support are eroding. Many people don't have children to take care of them, or as often happens, older people have children nearby, but their kids simply don't have the resources to support them. Okay, so I've talked about the problem, but as Steve Hilton, who visited our program in Kenya, saw, older people are making huge contributions to family, community, and society. They're heroes. In poorer communities around the world, older people are breadwinners and entrepreneurs. They're playing a vital role in caring for grandchildren, especially in households where parents have died of HIV and AIDS. Older people are householders and farmers. They're volunteers and community servants. They're fighting passionately for the rights of the vulnerable, and they're unendingly generous to their children and grandchildren. One of the strange things I find is, we've all got grandmothers, and we all appreciate our grandmothers, but somehow older women don't feature in development. And I think we have to consider why is that and do something about it moving ahead. When I came to HelpAge, I had experience in the humanitarian and development sector, like Steve was saying, but I was completely age blind. Despite all of my work on international development of 17 years, I never did anything to promote a program on aging. In the years since, of course, I've come to understand the need to work across the generations, both in the immediate relief context and in terms of longer-term development. Today, I'm shocked when I see how few resources are allocated to older people compared to other vulnerable groups. They are simply neglected. And as I learn more every day, this gap is not just a matter of moral lapse. It is short-sighted view of the world, and it will lead to financial disaster. Truly, we fail both the ethical and economic obligations when we ignore aging populations. It's incredible. There is no UN agency, obviously, dedicated to age. There's probably 4 people who work in a dedicated way in the whole United Nations on aging, which is a bit mind-blowing. How is it that we have, serious, planned and effective immunization programs for children around the world, a wonderful achievement of public health in many countries globally, but nothing of the sort for aging adults? Surely our century, where our aging populations will outnumber children, we can make strides here that would align this to the new demographic reality. There are very, very few NGOs helping older people in poor countries. In contrast, there are hundreds of organizations doing great work with children. I find it an awesome responsibility to be the chief executive of almost the only global NGO working on aging and network. We have to find a way to bring others into this cause, and we've got to get the children's agencies to work on the generational questions in a more integrated and effective way. The old age health challenge in developing countries is also daunting. I've talked about dementia before, but non-communicable diseases are growing day by day. The World Health Organization released some data last week. 60 to 80% of people over 60 in India, Ghana, South Africa have hypertension, and only 5% of them are receiving any form of treatment. The healthcare systems are completely inadequate for the issues of the disease of age, and there's very little tension and will to actually change the systems to deal with this. What's more, there remains a very limited understanding about the prevalence of HIV/AIDS among older people, and this is a very dangerous blind spot. Prevalence is growing as more people are surviving and living with the virus, and we're going to have to find solutions to the mix between age and HIV as we move ahead. We did do work a number of years ago with UNICEF to make visible the question of care. Half of the world's AIDS orphans are cared for by their grandparents. That's a remarkable thing. The sad indictment of the world is that we haven't managed to then get resources in the hands of those grandparents, despite the billions of dollars that have been poured into HIV, much of which has done remarkable things in terms of making antiretrovirals available. But the care agenda has been hidden, And my concern now, as we flatline the HIV/AIDS budget around the world, is that it's going to be even more hidden. And the burden of care is going to grow, and it will grow particularly for older people. When disasters strike, older people are some of the most vulnerable in the world. I mean, having worked for the Red Cross myself for many years, and then we can look at Katrina, we can look at Japan. However, if you go to a developing context, things are even more difficult for older people in crisis. If you go to Gulu today, you will go and find older people living still in Gulu, left behind, even though some people have managed to go home after the conflict in northern Uganda. Why is this? Why are we failing to recognize older people need special treatment in disasters? Why don't we recognize their fragility and their sometimes lack of mobility? And why, do they have to face not being able to queue for relief packages, therefore not receiving proper assistance? We've done research with the UN to highlight that only about 1% of funding goes to older people in crisis contexts, but they make up between 7 and 10% of a population in a crisis. They simply don't get the resources. Okay, that's the depressing news. Now I just want to quickly turn to some good news. I don't want to end with a sense that nothing can be done. A lot is being done and a lot can be done. We can use, Peter Diamond, who is an MIT economist, Nobel Prize winner last year, he's made a concept of the longevity dividend. The countries of tomorrow are going to be the countries that actually value aging and think through the policy agendas that are going to make a difference to actually make aging a positive experience, both economically, socially, and politically. Countries that ignore it are going to be the countries of yesterday. So, that's a big challenge. Then I just want to turn to some practical issues and practical agendas, and these were partly covered by the film. 3 things that older people, prioritize: income security in old age and food security. We can make sure that microcredit and loans are tailored and made available to older people. They are currently not. Even though Mohammed Yunus will say the Grameen Bank gives loans to older people, the actual credit officers of the Grameen Bank on the ground discriminate. They do not give loans to older people in Bangladesh. It's a big challenge. We've got to get tailored products that will really reach the right people. We need to tackle the issue of aging farmers and how can they pass their knowledge to the next generation, and how can we get young people wanting to farm. We need to make sure that older women and men have equal access to economic assets. A lot of older women lose their land rights, and that's another issue that needs to be worked on. And then we need to make sure older people have access to basic pensions. How can we have 70% of the world with no pensions, with no income security in old age? In terms of health, if you go to Sudan, you'll find that there's only one gerontologist in the whole of the country. There's one person who understands the issues of age and disease. That's no good. So we have to train healthcare professionals. We've got to try and get healthcare to remote areas so that older people can have access, proper access. And we can use technology, like has been used, to really make sure older people can actually be able to diagnose their problems so they don't get a stroke. If they get a stroke, they will end up bankrupting their own families. They will become a burden to their families. In disasters, we need to ensure older people are supported to be resilient, counted, and visible, to ensure older people have access to food and water and health services. And then we need to collaborate ourselves with NGOs and other service providers to make sure that we can get age-friendly response. I'm just about to come to the end. However, what matters more than anything, if I've learned anything in my 6 years with HelpAge, is voice, influence, and accountability. Even more, this is the key that gives older people energy for making change. And we see when older people stand up and are vocal, they bring about change. We believe, one of the big solutions are old people's associations, intergenerational self-help groups. We support many of those around the world, and they really deliver for older people in terms of effective responses to home care, income security initiatives, health promotion, and tackling other community challenges. Older people tackle conflict issues at the community level. They tackle many issues if you empower them to do that. So there's many, many opportunities that need to be taken, but somehow we're going to need a new global partnership on aging if we're going to get the momentum and the scale necessary. The Hilton Award is a major opportunity for HelpAge and for aging populations around the world. We believe that the prize will help us shine a much brighter light. Whenever I go and speak to people about aging, I always worry the light goes on, and then when I leave their office, the light goes off. I really hope the light doesn't go off tonight for some of you in this room, Because the key challenge is to really think about, well, what does it mean for us? What does it mean for you personally? What does it mean for the institutions that you represent? This is a tremendous honor, this award that we've won, and now it's the job of HelpAge to fulfill the trust that the Hilton Foundation has invested in us. We recognize that the Aging Challenge calls for the broadest possible response, and we want to work collaboratively to form innovative partnerships with like-minded partners, with NGOs such as the Hilton Award laureates, with aging experts and advocates here in the US like AARP, and with multilaterals in governments and foundations, and particularly also the world of business. Last night, I was very lucky. Eric, I'm not sure I've kept Eric with me. I was really lucky to sit next to Eric Hilton. Eric Hilton, for me, personifies the partnership approach. Over dinner last night, he really inspired me with his grounded philanthropy, with his constant search for solutions over dinner. He was completely going all over dinner looking for answers and momentum, and his deep life experience that he could draw upon for his philanthropy. A new global social and local contract, a social contract, global and local contract, will be wise if it can harness all ages for a better world. This award is a tribute to the millions of older people throughout the world who have struggled daily with extreme poverty and discrimination. It's through their considerable achievement and passionate selflessness that the world has become a better place for their grandchildren and ours. This day is theirs, this award is theirs, and it's our privilege to accept it on their behalf. Thank you.